Welcome back to Coffee Kurosawa, a podcast where a film obsessive and a film fan sit down to talk about the films that are important to us. My name is Ben Filipkowski, and I'm your resident film obsessive.
And I am Farrah Sarpkaya, a person who loves film, but like in a super chill, it's a Thursday night and I just want to see some cool practical effects kind of way.
Right, and today we're talking about Jurassic Park, the 1993 smash hit from Steven Spielberg about a theme park with real life dinosaurs.
Ooh.
Based on the novel of the same name by Michael Crichton, Jurassic Park remains a modern classic about the perils of science run amok and the power of nature. This is your spoiler and content warning right up front. Jurassic Park was rated PG-13 for scenes of intense science fiction terror, which arguably is the best, coolest rating you could get from the MPAA. So there is some violence, there is some blood and gore, and there is some PG-13 language alongside those scares. With all that being said, let's get out our little brushes, our little chisels, and we can dig up some discussion about this thrilling movie, 65 million years in the making. Farah, you've, I believe, seen this before, maybe, but if you had not, what are your thoughts? Or if you have seen it, what stood out to you? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I actually saw this movie for the first time last year, which, for those of you listening, 2023. And I think while I was watching it, I kept trying to figure out, have I seen this before? Because it's so iconic, I could not tell if I'd actually seen it start to end, or if I'd just seen enough bits and pieces to think I'd seen it in its entirety. Um, I am a big sci-fi nerd. I love like science-based sci-fi. Star Trek versus Star Wars, you know? And so this was 100% a movie up my alley. I loved the music, of course, and the practical effects were so cool. And I loved how real it seemed. It was true sci fi, something that could totally exist in the world as we know it. Um, and the literal tears in the eyes of the archaeologists who were seeing their lives work literally come to life in front of them was so, so good, and so many incredible moments of storytelling. It was a fun romp, and of note, the fact there was a female brat, as the kids say, and a little girl who was a coder who saved the day was so cool to see, particularly in the early 90s. And overall, it held up.
First of all, it's mind blowing that you maybe had not seen this until 2023.
I know.
Uh,
I know. The
um,
person that showed it to me was like, "How is this possible?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, dude. It wasn't on my radar when I was a kid."
yeah, this was absolutely on my radar as a kid. It came out when I was 3, which is gonna put in.
Don't make me think about my age
Yeah,
today. Get out of here.
people can do the math to figure out how old I am now. I think like as you were kind of talking about this, you hadn't seen it, and I was like, you haven't seen this 30-year-old movie, and then I thought, I just called this a modern classic, and it's 30 years old, and I think like. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
okay, it's 30 years old, but it holds up very well. You kind of touched on that in your thoughts there, and yeah, it is a remarkable thing to watch this far on. We can possibly get into this discussion later on. There's a lot of parallels with this movie and Jurassic World, which came out, I want to say 2013, 2014. I can't remember, but either way, um, yeah, this has it's got a different engine under the hood, even if it's dealing with the same ideas. Because it actually wants to engage with those ideas. Whole other can of worms. I'm getting
Tangents,
yeah,
tangents, Ben.
huge tangent
Movie
here.
summary. Let's go.
Movie summary. Let's quickly recap what happens in this movie because a lot goes on. At a high level, industrialist John Hammond has built an incredible new park on Isla Nublar, but his backers are skittish following a worker's death. Hammond invites a team of experts, paleontologist Dr. Alan Grant, paleobotanist Dr. Ellie Sattler, and mathematician Dr. Ian Malcolm, to visit the park and give it their seal of approval. But the park is no ordinary park. It's got real dinosaurs. Spoilers, if you haven't seen it yet. Hammond and his team have basically cloned dinosaurs and functionally brought extinct species back to life. But before anyone can really dig into the ethical ramifications of all this, things go wrong. A jilted employee cuts the security systems so he can steal dino embryos for Ham's competitor, which unfortunately means that he has also cut electricity to the dinosaur enclosures, keeping them in through, you know, air quotes, gentle electric shocks. Chaos ensues, exacerbated by a tropical storm hitting the island. Numerous dinos escape, wreaking havoc across the island and the park, and forcing our heroes into survival mode. Dr. Grant is stuck shepherding kids through a park. Hammond's grandkids are on the island as well. Dr. Sattler is meanwhile tasked with restoring the power to the park, and an injured Ian Malcolm helps Hammond from the control room, all leading to a thrilling standoff with a pack of escaped velociraptors and a narrow, I'm saying escape twice, a narrow escape with an assist from a conveniently timed and conveniently placed Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's all very high level. That's ignoring a ton of really cool detail. And it's kind of some of that detail, I think, is what we're going to be digging into here today, specifically as we look at this movie in the context of the film technique mise en scène. So, I know what you might be asking yourself if you're listening at home. What the hell is mise en scène? I'm very glad you asked. This is a French term. It literally means placing on stage. Basically, in the context of film, mise en scène is everything you see on the screen when you're watching a movie. It's the set design, the props, the costuming, even the actors and lighting. It's really every element that contributes to the overall thematic effect of the film and the vision of the filmmakers. And to me, this movie is a really great example of mise en scène, and particularly how that kind of that place setting, that creation of space, can really help build up to a climactic moment.
So for those of us who didn't study film stuff or who aren't giant film nerds, it feels kind of funny to say there's a term for everything you see in a movie because that's literally the movie. So
Mhm.
like is there something like that specifically you want to look for when you're talking about mise en scène, or is it just like that is kind of the point? It is everything to do with the visuals that you're seeing on the screen.
Yeah, a note on the term is that there's some criticism of it for how broadly it's applied. It can even refer to like the shot composition, like the way that a shot is framed. In terms of like, if you're looking at mise en scène, it's kind of you're looking at how these techniques come together. These various different things work together versus like that's an interesting plant that they have in the corner there, or, I like this color. It's looking at how those things all play together to contribute to a greater whole versus an individual little element. Like you're not necessarily looking at the granular details. The granular details matter insofar as you're using them to kind of figure out what the movie's trying to tell you, or at least what you're trying to take away from the movie. So if you're kind of going into anything with an eye for mise en scène, uh, we could be we could simplify it and say the setting a little bit more, but I think even that kind of does a disservice to it because it is about um, inhabiting a place, that sense of being in a space or seeing into a space that a movie is presenting to us.
So there's a term that so I went to chef school, and so there's a term that you use for when you set up all your ingredients. It's mise en place, which is everything in its place. And so if I, as a non-film person, but a very much a food person, am thinking about mise en scène, all of those different ingredients go into the pot or the pan or the whatever to make the dish you're trying to serve eventually. So maybe that's a good metaphor if y'all are out there making your dinner, making your lunch, and you're like, I have all my ingredients in all these little ramekins and bowls. That's kind of what we're talking about. All those little bits and pieces that do eventually go in are all equally important because without one of them, you're not going to get the same result. at the end of the day.
Exactly. I love that. I truly love the metaphor that like a good movie or like a TV show is like a feast. For me, the language I like to use around like if something has something you can really dig into, like oh boy, it's juicy. There's like it's got all these little wonderful little morsels for you to feast on and analyze. I love that sort of extended metaphor.
Well, I was going to say that's a great point to sort of jump off into some of the big juicy pieces that you have brought to us today to talk about. We've got two different scenes. The first one on deck is basically one of the first scenes in the movie. And it feels like the first scene in the movie, even though it's not actually. And we'll dig into that a little bit. But it's a scene where all of the various doctors that have been assembled, both by the insurance company and by by Mr. Hammond, are in a helicopter making their way to Jurassic Park before they've really even been told anything about it. So talk to us about why this scene is what you wanted to bring to the table, if you will, for
this
for
feast.
mise en scene. Yes.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of if we're talking about mise en scène and that kind of sense of like everything contributing. This is a wonderful little scene because it pulls together so many things and acts as a little microcosm of the movie that we're about to watch. We get a real sense of who our characters are in this scene. We've already been introduced to most of them. We've already met Dr. Grant. We've already met Dr. Sattler. We've already met Hammond. We've met Gennaro, the lawyer. We already have a sort of sense of who these people are. But this scene kind of reintroduces us to our main cast, and we get a recap of why they're all there and a little tease of what's to come. Immediately apparent, I think, is that each character has like a visual. They have a distinctive look. They have an icon, almost at this point, 30 years on, an iconic outfit. At the time, I think the thinking was just they all have to have a distinct appearance. They all have to stand apart from each other. Not that they would, blend together or be indistinguishable from one another by any means, but there's some kind of like immediate color coding with everyone's outfit. Hammond wears all white. He's got the short sleeve button up white trousers as well. He's got his cane with the amber headpiece on it with the little mosquito trapped in there, which becomes a plot point insofar as it's how they've brought dinosaurs back to life. So we're getting a little tease of that. But it also kind of establishes Hammond as in that tradition or that kind of visual tradition of the wealthy colonial landowner. It's very much like he's wearing all white. He's this outsider. He's not getting his hands dirty. He's wealthy. So there's some visual coding there. Dr. Grant is meanwhile. I don't think he's wearing jeans. I believe he's just wearing some good reliable like work pants, basically some good slacks or khakis. He's got a blue shirt. He's got his little red kerchief on as well. Got his hat, and he's got the the Velociraptor claw that he's playing with, which kind of shows that he's literally carrying his work with him as a paleontologist. But also that the fact that he's holding this claw and kind of playing with it also teases that the Velociraptors we're going to see these things, in the flesh later on in the movie. So it's a little bit of foreshadowing there. Sattler I think she's got the pink shirt on, shorts. Like she looks like she's ready to go hiking somewhere. Like she's not afraid to get her hands dirty. Kind of tells us a bit about her character. Which brings us to Ian Malcolm, wearing, I think, black jeans, a very puffy black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a leather jacket. He's wearing a leather jacket in Costa Rica in the summer. That's
Classic
yeah.
Jeff Goldblum.
He's also got tinted. They're not sunglasses. I think at this point they're just tinted glasses. He's just oozing cool. Immediately starts flirting with Sattler. So this is already giving us a sense of who these characters are, what's going on. But I think if we kind of extrapolate a bit on that, we also get these beautiful wide shots of the island itself, which is giving us our first glimpse of the setting. But we're also kind of getting some of that early branding that we're going to start seeing popping up throughout the rest of the movie. So there's some Jurassic Park logos, some InGen logos. But also interesting is that there are problems with the seatbelts right off the bat. There's a little faulty little error that they did not really anticipate. They hit some turbulence. Everyone buckles up. Grant is stuck with two, uh, basically like the female end of the belt buckle, like the piece the other piece slots into in lay terms. And this is going to kind of tease what's going to come later on in the movie, where allegedly all these dinosaurs are female, but life finds a way. Grant is, of course, finding a way to buckle up, even if he doesn't have working seat belt buckles at this point in time. Yeah, we're just treated to this little microcosm of everything that's going to happen. The characters are responding to the crisis of the turbulence in ways that will become more meaningful later on. Hammond is insisting, "Oh, it's fine, it's fine. It's just a little chop. It's totally normal." The lawyer Gennaro is freaking out. I would be with Gennaro freaking out. I am not a comfortable flyer. Grant and Sattler are meanwhile kind of just doing the work, and this is going to kind of all become more apparent in their characters as we progress through the movie.
Yeah. So one thing about this scene is, other than those glimpses of the island, right? We're just looking at the inside of a helicopter. Like, it's not visually stimulating, if you will. And so the attention to detail that they've shown here with establishing these very distinct characters. I believe Dr. Malcolm is described as a rock star, for example. Um, and the having two female parts of the buckles, and the very chill of Hammond compared to the insurance guy who is panicked AF. Um, if we're thinking about, all these different parts that go into this, the fact that this scene stands out to me as the first scene, even though it's not, is very interesting, because it's not, like I said, visually exciting, but it is a very logical start point for this film, which is very cool. Um, so
Yeah, there's some alternate universe where this is the opening scene, and we get these like dramatic, wide shots, wide establishing shots of the helicopter approaching the island, because those look stunning. Like those are beautiful. In that alternate universe, this scene is followed up with very talky bits of like, "Oh, well, you're that paleontologist that Hammond is trying to get to sign off on the park." We lose something if this is the starting point. But simultaneously, this is also a great way to bring us into the action a bit more directly. Like the story's progressing, things are moving on. We're not necessarily in exposition mode here anymore, which is really nice because we start to see more of these elements take hold. And I believe that this entire like the concept that this entire scene is a little foreshadowing, little microcosm of what's to come, is something that's really taken off in social media in the past few years, from my recollection. But the more you look at it, the more it does kind of it stands up. I think it's a really great theory. It's a really fun little thing, and we kind of continue on from this bit with like you get the iconic King Kong style gates. I don't know why I think of those as King Kong style gates, but the Jurassic Park gates, they have the torches up. They open up as the heavily branded Jeep, or they're either Jeeps or they are
yeah,
Ford Land Rovers or whatever. Um, all the
brought to you by.
Yeah, there's such an element of visual identity and branding in the stuff that we're seeing on screen that, and you and I were talking about this beforehand, that it is clearly in the universe of the film designed to sell things to kids. but it's also the add-on effect is that for us as viewers, it's also gonna sell things to kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, like to me, the color. If I could get a little SUV in the Jurassic Park SUV colors, do it in a second. I would love it.
Yep. One other thing about the way they shot the helicopter though is because it's in a helicopter and it feels so intimate, we feel like we're part of the movie. Like the angle from which they shoot most of those shots is as if you yourself are sitting in the helicopter watching these people interact rather than that kind of wider shot of being part of a crowd or being like way back and watching this big conversation unfold. You only a couple times have the whole group in a shot, and even then you're still kind of at the edge of the helicopter, which I think really sets us up for that jump from the intimacy of the helicopter into these big grand gates and beautiful big fields and acres of dinosaurs.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. There's a lot of like, and if I'm gonna refer it back to mise en scène, we are seeing all these elements early because they are going to be relevant to us later on. It's equal parts foreshadowing. It's equal parts building towards that greater effect, I think. So that's my take on it. I love this build up. And I think it's important to kind of note that build up because of how it helps us navigate the rest of the movie later on. All this exists to kind of give us information, to give us a grounding in this world, so that when we do start seeing the spectacle of it and everything else that's going on, we're not really burdened by questions about it. We're not really bothered by, like, we have the information the characters have. We are in it with them. We understand how this world works. It's almost like it's a neat little bit of world building in that they're laying all the cards on the table. These are all the pieces that they're going to use, and some of that's going to come into effect later on. But we're not going to be. There aren't going to be a ton of, hit the brakes. Let's exposit at the audience for a bit, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, we continue on into a little bit deeper into the film, um, and off into a slight tangent, off of our defined script. But there's a moment not too long after that where doctors Sadler, um, and Grant like break one of the rides that's an informational ride to get into where the dinosaurs are actually being grown or raised or whatever. And those little details of like it was this easy for two people to just pop this thing open and go into where the scientists are. And you're like, that seems too easy. That seems too easy for a place that is supposedly very secure and
Yeah,
safe, and no wonder these insurance people are a little bit
yeah,
concerned for their investment.
yeah.
So
If you just push it hard, it'll break.
yeah,
And yet they
uh-huh,
spared no expense.
yeah, truly,
Interesting.
no
Interesting.
expense.
Yeah, I love that little bit, and I think that's also really a great little note because of it is the human interaction with these things, the kind of that starts to shake things up, or just even if we want to extrapolate that a little bit more, the way that life interacts with these systems that they've tried to create. Malcolm puts it best that life finds a way. Like it's the
Mhm.
iconic line, and I think that is thematically a major underpinning of this is that you can try and do all this stuff. You can try as best you can to control the natural world. You can try and recreate the natural world. It will push back. I really love that, and the fact that Malcolm's field of study is chaos theory. He is a self-described chaotician. The entire point of that is like how complex systems interact and collide with each other. And I think that's a really fun little thematic underpinning throughout the entire movie.
Well, it's interesting too, because if we think about how each individual scene is put together, so from the two female plugs to the broken guardrails
Hmm.
in the ride, to the fence posts, to how easy it is later on for this disgruntled employee to break absolutely everything, etc., etc. The movie very clearly, to your point, lays out everything that's going to go wrong. It's like the Chekhov's gun
Hmm.
of a horror film
Yeah.
of, okay, we're telling you how much work and money we put into the security system. Ahem. We're we used frog DNA,
Yeah.
and then they're like, oh, but frogs can change gender
Yeah.
when they don't have enough males to propagate. Oops. We have done, we have automatic driving cars, which means you can't drive the car if you need to get away. And like they put it right there in front of you. They set the table for you, if you will, of all the things that possibly will and surely do go wrong. And it's, yeah.
Yeah. I think there's also, I think it's also worth remembering everything does go wrong. Um, but it all occurs because there's one thing that opens the floodgates, basically. Like it becomes this cascading effect of problems. And it is Dennis Nedry, the computer programmer at the park. He's engaged in just corporate theft, basically. He's trying to steal the dinosaur embryos. His entire plan hinges on the fact that he's the one person who knows how the code truly works at the park because he's a bit of a slacker. Uh, he has cut corners and he's like, I'll just shut down security, which turns out he didn't set it up so that if he shuts down security, he didn't set it up so that you can just turn off the cameras. If you have to turn off the cameras, you have to turn off the electrified fences. You have to turn off the door locks. You basically have to shut down power, which is like, interesting. Interesting that you would take this approach, and yet somehow you're the guy for it, even though I think there's even a line in there where Nedry even says, like, I'm the only one who would do this work for Hammond at this price point. And then he's frustrated. He feels undervalued. I don't know. So
Yeah.
it's all his fault, is what I'm getting at. I mean, everything that happens after that is the result of cutting corners. But what if he just hadn't done that?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny too, because like in the current climate of employment, oftentimes you see, companies asking for 5 years experience for an internship, and you're like, well, we're going to get the best of the best for an internship, pay, but someone who's got 5 years experience. And this kind of feels like Hammond was like, I can only spend so much on this. I'm going to get the best of the best asterisk that will only take low market value as an employment. Like, that's a dream job. Like, if I could be a coder working in Costa Rica at a dinosaur park, oh my god, you could pay me so little money. But that's like, I can only assume even less money than you could encourage someone to go work at a dinosaur park. Because, like, yeah,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
cheaped out.
There's a lot
They
of cheaping out. And I think it's interesting. Yeah, because that is another thing that keeps coming up in this movie. We spared no expense. They clearly did.
Uh-huh.
Corners were cut, mistakes were made. But I think what kind of it's interesting because if you read the book that this is based on, Hammond is just like almost cartoonishly evil capitalist. Does not care about his grandkids. Winds up getting eaten by dinosaurs. In the movie, though, he's played by the wonderful grandfatherly Richard Attenborough. His entire character is changed, not only through the performance, but in how they write the character, to the point where it's like, yeah, he did cut corners, but don't you just love him? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is a terrible tragedy, and I don't know how many people died, but
But also, he's
yeah,
just the sweetest old man with the best of intentions, asterisk. Um, yeah, and even just thinking about, you know, not just the visual setup right? But that plot and that story of this is the best we could get with the money of quote unquote sparing no expense. What does that say about literally everything else in your park? But it's also interesting that there's a scene quite early on where they wine and dine the scientists with like beautiful food. And you're like, okay, what did you not ex- uh what did you actually spend the money on? Aesthetics? Ask question mark?
Yeah. Like the chef is a
Yeah.
named character.
Yeah.
I can't remember the chef's name, but Hammond is like the chef. Oh, we spared no expense because he a fine meal of Chilean sea bass, which I think we've chatted about this. Very hilarious that reference to Chilean sea bass led to Chilean sea bass overfishing, and they had to do some major
Uh-huh.
conservation efforts to prevent extinction there.
Steven Spielberg needs to stop screwing with ocean creatures. First it was sharks, and now it's the Chilean sea bass,
Yeah.
and he's just got it out for marine biology. I don't know what's happening here.
Steven Spielberg just like he sees that Jurassic Park leads to Chilean sea bass overfishing, and he's just not again. Oh no.
What have I done?
Yeah.
What have I done?
Yeah.
All right. Spielberg, this is the sign to go do a movie about how important it is to save the oceans or save the rainforests. So we'll all do it because we
Yes.
saw it in a Spielberg movie. Um,
Incredible.
so moving on to our next kind of official line item, if you will. The next scene we kind of put a pin in for this is quite late on in the movie. We have had some drama, we have had some dinosaur attacks, we have had some epic chases through hallways and jungles, and quite a few characters have died. But we have our main cast of two Sadler and Grant and the children being chased by velociraptors through a very cool room with dinosaur bones. And then they are, at the 11th hour, saved by a T-Rex. So what is it about this scene that made you think, yes, this is what we must talk about?
Well, I think I love this scene. I love this bit at the end here. Yeah, the scene at the end here is the chase is very this kind of chase through the kind of the park center, I think is the best term. I don't know why I get hung up on. I want to call it like the headquarters. It's the park center. It's like the reception area.
Mm-hmm.
But the main HQ here, where an injured Malcolm holes up with Hammond, they're trying to set things up and control things from the rooms here, and everything kind of seems to be okay. We get into this chase scene, and I think this is a really great example of like how, because we have spent so much time in these spaces, like we visit this location very early on in the movie. They first get to the park. They are welcomed into the park center here, and they're just full of questions. And Hammond is like, no, we'll go on the tour. We'll show you how it's done. And as I think about it, it's also interesting that it's shot in such a way that scene early on, they're going up the stairs, I think, in the park center, and we're kind of seeing them as though we are at the front door looking in. When they're escaping, they're climbing on the kind of scaffolding around the suspended dinosaur bones, pursued by raptors. They're climbing down, and it's almost like a mirror of that earlier scene. Again, he's on set. We've seen the setting that we're in. We've seen the location. We've seen these props before. So it kind of gives us that grounding of space and place, which is really helpful, really useful. And we talked about this when we discussed Jaws. Spielberg, master at blocking, master at shot composition, and he has a real great sense of where the camera exists in physical space, where the characters are in physical space. And so we get this again. They get to the ground. There's a velociraptor here. They turn around. There's a velociraptor behind them. There's a third velociraptor. just as one velociraptor is about to lunge at them, they're surrounded on all sides. And I've just been harping on about how good Spielberg is at physical space. A T Rex shows up out of nowhere, somehow surprises the velociraptors as well as the main characters. Again, this is like a 20-foot tall creature that could not fit through a door frame. Somehow just is in this space, proceeds to solo the pack of velociraptors like it's nobody's business. Lets out a triumphant roar as that banner of "When Dinosaurs Ruled the World" drifts down around it. It's really cool. I love it. It looks so cool. But it's just that moment of we've spent so much time understanding physical space here, understanding our setting, understanding all of this, that it kind of tricks our brain into like, yeah, of course, T-Rex. Sure, why not? But when you stop and think about it, it does not make that like I'm hung up on it. It does not make a ton of sense to me.
So it's funny you say that, because this is not the first time the T-Rex has appeared out of nowhere, right? Like, there's a scene earlier on where they're on the road, they're stuck because the electricity in the cars has stopped. And there's like a 40-foot drop on one side, and that's the side the dinosaur comes from. And you're like, where did this T-Rex come from off the side of this road? It doesn't make any sense. And so returning to that here in this room, you're like, is this T-Rex just magic somehow? I don't entirely understand the T-Rex physics.
The T-Rex is Batman, clearly, because you turn around, Batman's there. You turn around, the T-Rex is there. Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's the other thing that I don't know if it's not so much that it strains, suspension of disbelief or anything, but it is a little jarring because we see that space in the T-Rex paddock. There's like, it's like, it's very odd. I don't fully get it, because that space in the T-Rex paddock is like forested jungle canopy, and the T-Rex walks out of that and its head is almost at head height, at like the top of the fence of the paddock.
Yeah.
And then it escapes. And then it flips the cars down that side of the ravine, which is suddenly a ravine. Like, was the T-Rex walking on? Yeah. I feel like there's something I'm missing. Because the more I think about it, the more it's like, this makes no sense. But you don't notice it in the moment. You don't really think about it in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and
yeah.
I gotta wonder, like, as viewers, the rest of the film is so consistent and so clear with this concept of everything's in its place. Everything is on stage. Everything is intentional within our view. Asterisk. These two moments break that. And, like, I obviously can't speak for Spielberg, but, like, he seems like the kind of director that would notice. Like, hey, we just went from a 40-foot ravine to flat land where there's a goat. Like, what? That's not a mistake that he made. So why was that the choice? Right? Like, both for the fence and later on this T-Rex saving the day. Why was that the choice? That this T-Rex could just appear out of thin air?
Yeah, I hate that I am falling back on this in something that is meant to be like critical film theory. We're gonna have deep thoughts about movies. I think it's just cool.
Yeah.
It's cooler this way. I just looked up. I looked up T-Rex paddock, and the autocomplete was explained. The top result is a post from 11 years ago on Reddit. Someone has a top-down drawing of this, and I'm like, okay, this makes sense. I can go with it. Their explanation is that there's a large single fence that we see that is like along the side of the Jeeps, or I guess they are actually Ford Explorers.
There you go.
along the side of the track that these cars are on, and that the paddock is at the same level uh, as the roadway. But then there's another fence, and then on the other side of that fence is a at least 15-foot drop.
I don't
So
get it. I
I
can't.
I'm gonna send you a link.
We'll put it in the resources of
Yeah,
this episode because this does not like make sense to my brain.
yeah,
Um, but it's interesting that a detail like that, because they explain so clearly everything else, this stands out as like, what the heck is going on?
yeah. It's But
Oh.
again, like you don't think about it. I wonder if this was very much a thing of like they would certainly have to have, just in terms of the visual effects, the practical effects, the physical location that they're shooting in. They would have to have complete understanding and control over every variable. Like they
Mhm.
need to know that space. So this must just be like a question of like maybe they just didn't. They're like, yeah, like there's a second fence. Like the drop off is here. It's not here. Like this is where the ravine is. So that's the only thing that really makes sense to me. Or I missed something in my excitement over seeing a T Rex, which is completely understandable. Which is probably, honestly, that's probably the most logical explanation. Is that I'm just, I'm location blind when a dinosaur is on screen.
That's, you know what? That's pretty fair. Uh Incredible. So at the end of the day, as you go through and you watch this movie and you enjoy all of the animatronic dinosaurs that are totally real dinosaurs, and the honestly pretty good CGI that pretty much stands up, um overall, if you're thinking of this, I keep wanting to say mise en place because I know that's wrong. Mise en scène. What little details would you say to a film newbie such as myself, to look out for when you're trying to kind of explain or dig into that in a movie that you're watching?
Yeah. In general, in a movie that you're watching, I think if I focus on Jurassic Park, I think it is all those little elements of branding that they pull in are a great example of that. They kind of there's a continuous reinforcement that we are in a park, that we are in this kind of there's a capitalist intent behind this. There is a purpose behind all of this, and it is to be an experience and an adventure for the erstwhile guests. And I think in general, like watching for mise en, I just about said mise en place. Watching for mise en scène
Gotcha.
is, I think, paying attention to the setting, the staging of a scene, like whether it's the colors of costumes, whether it is costuming details, whether it is props, whether it is a physical set or a virtual set. And I think looking at all of that with an eye towards, what does this contribute? What does this mean for the movie as a whole? What is this trying to tell me? Or what does it make me feel? I think is probably the most basic approach to that and a great starting point.
So this is a movie about dinosaurs. So I'm also going to ask you a very important question before we get into what's next, social media, all that fun stuff. Ben,
Yes.
what is your favorite dinosaur?
Oh boy. You've asked me this before, and it
Uh-huh.
has been harder to answer in the past. I think in the context of Jurassic Park, it is the T Rex. The T Rex is the coolest dinosaur in Jurassic Park. If we're talking about scientifically accurate understanding of dinosaurs, Sir David Attenborough, who is the brother of Richard Attenborough, who played not Ian Malcolm, who played John Hammond in this movie, narrated a series on Apple TV Plus called, I believe, Prehistoric Planet. Don't quote me on that, but it had scientifically accurate velociraptors that were covered in feathers and were about the size of a small lab retriever. And I love those guys. Put feathers on dinosaurs. It's cool. It's also
They're
accurate.
just chickens.
Yeah.
They're just murder chickens. Incredible.
Farrah, yourself, did you already identify your favorite dinosaur, or do I have to?
I didn't.
You did not.
No.
I got so preoccupied.
We
with
got
my
really
own
excited
answer.
about
Yeah.
murder chickens. I get
Yeah.
it.
What would your favorite dinosaur be?
My reference for dinosaurs goes way back to Magic School Bus, where there was a scene with, and I'm gonna say this right this time, Parasaurolophilus. They're the ones with the big crowns on their head. Apparently, it means near-crested lizard. But they make cool. Obviously, we don't know what they actually sounded like, but in the show, they made really cool sounds. They're really colorful and they're very cool and they're herbivores, and I love them and they're really cute, even though they're massive. So, I Magic School Bus, 25 years later, influences so many things in my life.
Shout outs to Magic School Bus.
Indeed. So, after all that, what we are watching next, I'm so excited because it is my all-time favorite movie. It's a movie that I put on our list, and it just celebrated its 15th anniversary, the stop-motion film from Laika Studios, Coraline. And we're going to be talking about symbolism and perspective and its impact on the stories that were told. And I am so excited for y'all to watch this absolutely beautiful, incredible movie that I've seen too many times, quite frankly, but never enough. Never enough. Until then, Ben, where can people find you?
Yeah, people can find me on Threads and Letterboxd as Benjimon, which I will spell out because I spell it weird. Bengeemon. It's just my name, but spelled like a Digimon or a Pokemon. You can also follow this podcast on Facebook as Coffee Kurosawa. Farrah, where can folks find you?
You can find me on Instagram and Threads as Farrah Sarpkaya. We will link all of these things in the show notes. And if you like the sound of my voice, you can find me on sarpkaya.ca, my website, where I offer services as a voice actor. Thank you all for listening. We hope you have enjoyed Jurassic Park, and we can't wait for next time to talk Coraline. Goodbye.